Thank you to SwitchBot for sponsoring today's video. One of the reasons why I love working with SwitchBot is because they are focused on upgrading existing items and tech in the home instead of replacing them with entirely new smart devices. Affordably and quite simply, SwitchBot products turn existing items in the home smart. They have products that can automate your home, like the SwitchBot curtain, remote, or tag, or they have home security products like the Pan Tilt Cam 2, the motion sensor, or even their new smart lock. I love their smart lighting like the LED strip light or the color bulbs. And with Christmas right around the corner, I'll be using my color bulbs to set a cozy and festive atmosphere in my home. While each device has its own functionality and can perform its own functions independently, you can supercharge it by combining it with other SwitchBot devices in the ecosystem. And while I love these products for myself, I also really love them for my family members who have mobility issues. SwitchBot makes their life a lot easier. From November 18th until the 28th, they are having their annual Black Friday sale with amazing discounts, so make sure you check my pinned comment for details. You get extra discount. So thanks again, SwitchBot, for supporting our channel. And now onto today's video. Hi, welcome to Jovie's home. Lately, I have been interacting with a lot of new people through my job and through activities and things that I'm doing outside the house. And almost every time that I meet a new person who is not American, they always ask me like, oh, great that you're here now, but I bet you can't wait to move back to the United States, right? And maybe my answers can surprise people what I say to that. And I thought that would be maybe interesting to make a YouTube video about. So if you would like to hear my response to people saying, aren't you moving back to the US? Or don't you look forward to living in the United States again? If you want to know what I say to that, then why don't you come on in, kick off your shoes and stay a while. I'm really glad you're here. So if this is your first time watching a Jovie's home video, let me just give you a quick background. I am an American that has been living in the Netherlands for the last 14 years. And I've had my kids here and I've really built a life here. So this is kind of where I'm coming from. My perspective is after certainly having lived here for a long period of time. And I like to compare how things were in the States or what my life would be like if I lived in the States now, because it's interesting. And I'm not, these are just my opinions and you are free to disagree with them, but this is my channel and my video, so I'm going to tell you my opinions, and that's it. Let's get to it. So one of the first things that I talk about when people ask me if I want to go back to the United States, when I tell them, oh, hell no, your health insurance is tied to your job. If you lose that job, you lose that health insurance. And yeah, sure, you can buy health insurance on the free market, but I mean, the prices are shocking. I did have a friend who was paying like between $3,000 and $4,000 per month for her family of three, which is just what? So yes, people who have jobs and who are working in a company or whatever, they maybe don't even have to pay at all. However, I just find it so unfair that your job determines whether or not you can have access to healthcare. In Europe, or at least in the Netherlands where we live, yes, we all pay for our own health insurance. I have the basic health insurance, and I pay about 112 euros per month for me and my two kids. That 112 is just for me, and then the kids are for free. And then I do have a deductible, or an own risk as it's called here, of 385 euro per year. It doesn't matter if I'm working, if I'm not working. If my employer has a plan with another provider, I can choose to participate in that, maybe get a discount. A lot of employers do that. But I don't have to. I can stay with my own insurance and it's fine. And this gives me a lot of comfort in knowing that if life were to happen, something happens and I lose my job for some reason, maybe I'm sick, right? Like if I get sick and I cannot work anymore, that I'm not going to end up bankrupt because I can no longer afford health insurance. When I was little, we lived in Canada for a while, and my father had brain cancer when I was little. And this would have devastated my family if we were not living in Canada. I don't know how we would have been able to pay for his treatment. He was sick for a year and a half before, unfortunately, he died. But this insecurity of access to affordable health care, again, unless you are working, it's scary. And it just doesn't feel good for me. I would feel very uncomfortable, despite the fact that my husband works and I work, and that we are, you know, we're like a middle class family, everything is okay. I still think, what if? What if one day? You never know what's going to happen. And it doesn't feel safe. I don't feel safe with the way that health insurance and healthcare is organized in the United States. The second thing that really discourages me from moving back or ever having a desire to move back to the States is the work-life balance. I feel like, certainly in the Netherlands, but in other European countries too, there is much more emphasis on having like a proper work-life balance. This is why under European law, employees are guaranteed a minimum of 20 days off per year, excluding like public holidays and things, but like you are entitled to 20 days. And if you work full time, that's basically 4 weeks of vacation or holiday per year. There is the ability for parents to take a parental leave day. Typically, this is unpaid. I know there are some changes happening right now in the system where I think some of those days will be paid. However, let's just presume that they're unpaid, because my point is still the same. You can be a lawyer, a doctor, a professor, a teacher. You can be a nurse. You can be whatever. Like pretty much any job in this country, you're able to ask to have a parental leave day. And on this day, you don't go to work. You are not paid for this day, but your contract stays in place and you can spend time with your kids while they're small. I don't know how that would be perceived in the United States. And I don't, well, I mean, I have some, I can imagine what it would look like if you just went up to your boss and said, like, hey, I'd like to work 1 day a week less, but I want you to keep my contract in place. You don't have to pay me for that day, but yeah, I want you to keep my contract like this. And for the next like 3 years, I'm just not going to work on Fridays because I'm going to take this time to be with my kids. I can imagine that most people would end up without a job if that's what they wanted, because there is no real appreciation in the States, despite what some political parties would have you believe, that it's like so family friendly. That's not family friendly if you can't take time off to be with your family. So here you can, and that's really incredibly, incredibly valuable to me and to my family. And it's something that I would love to see in the United States as well. The next thing I want to talk about is when a Dutch person wants to move to the United States or is thinking about it or talking about it with me, one of the things that I bring up very often is, okay, but where are you moving? Like, what city do you want to live in? Because I lived in Arizona, and in Arizona, you cannot be without a car. Like, I mean, maybe you can, but it's very difficult to live your life without a car. Certainly there are some cities, New York, Boston, Chicago, that have some kind of public transportation infrastructure, but it is nothing like how we have it set up in the Netherlands, where you have absolutely reliable, good public transportation that can get you to work and back, or you can be on your bike. The bicycle infrastructure here is amazing, so you don't have to have a car. And a lot of people and a lot of families just go their whole life without having a car, and they're fine here. Your grocery store is in your neighborhood. You can walk to the school. You can, everything is kind of that you might need is in your neighborhood, and what you don't, things that are not in your neighborhood that you might need, you can get to with public transportation. And I think that would be a really big adjustment now, for me, but also for anyone that is thinking about moving from the Netherlands to the States, is unless you're going to one of these cities with really a very good public transportation infrastructure, you need to get ready to live in your car basically for like many hours, commuting to work and back. Every time you need to go to the grocery store, you have to take your car, driving your kids to school and picking them up from school. Um, you know, anytime you want to go somewhere, neighborhoods are not set up the way they are here. So most neighborhoods in the States, you have your residential neighborhoods, which is where everybody is going to live. Um, but there will be no businesses there. There will be no supermarkets there. There will not be really like things that you need in that neighborhood. It's just homes. And then outside of that area that's where you're going to find your like more commercial places of business. But in order to get to those, most likely you need a car. And that's, like I'm pretty happy to be able to live most of my life without having to use a car. That's a big advantage that I see here, and that I value a lot, and that I would miss it if I didn't have it anymore. Another thing, and this is a little bit hard to talk about because I'm not really sure how to phrase it, so I'm going to just try. But I find that when I go to the United States, whenever I'm there for like a week or two or whatever, however long I'm there, I feel like I live in this constant state of anxiety. I'm scared. I'm nervous. There's something that doesn't feel safe for me when I'm in the States. Probably it's, this Second Amendment that is so important to Americans, and everybody being able to get a gun and have their gun and all their guns and getting their guns in Walmart. It really creates a feeling of unease and anxiety within me, maybe also within you. It's uncomfortable. And when I'm there, maybe I don't notice it as much as when I come back to Europe or to the Netherlands and my plane lands in Amsterdam and I'm just like, I feel okay again. And that's something that I hope that maybe you in the comments can explain better, or you've experienced that, or you'll know how to say what I mean. But there really is this feeling of just unease and not feeling safe when I'm in the States. Yeah, maybe I'm a snowflake or whatever. Like I'm just a nervous person, if you want to say that. There is something to it. There is something there. Yeah, and in Europe, I know people can have guns in Europe. Okay, this is not. I'm not saying that this doesn't exist here. It does, but I think that in order to get a gun in Europe, it is much, much, much more difficult than it is in the States. It is also much more highly regulated than it is in the States, and I'm pretty sure that you cannot get. Like I think that you can probably get hunting rifles or things like that if that's what you want and you go hunting, you can get that here. But I don't think that you can get like machine guns or like access to semi-automatic weapons the way that you can in the States. And why does anybody even need to have semi-automatic weapons? I don't know. I don't know. If you're a Dutch parent and you're planning on moving to the States and you have a young kid, like I do, I have two small kids, forget that freedom of letting them go to school on their own the way that they do here. Here you see really like first, second graders cycling on their own to their neighborhood school, not a parent in sight. And that's okay here. That is not okay in the States. So your children will lose a lot of their independence and autonomy, because, yeah, it's just not safe and it's not allowed. So really, you have to be, if your kids are alone, like that's not allowed until they're, I think, teenagers at a certain age. But, certainly not in primary school. You will not see primary school kids going to and from on their own. And I think that's a disservice. That would be a disadvantage for my kids, that they lose that autonomy and that they lose that independence if we move back to the States. Speaking about schools, I would not feel comfortable to let my kids go to school in the United States. I think that we would have to look into something like homeschooling, which is something that is certainly more prevalent in the States than it is here in the Netherlands. But really, like, the fact that we as a society are becoming desensitized to all of the news about school shootings, like all the time, says something that there's a problem, to me at least, in the society. This is not normal that there are multiple dozens of school shootings each year. I mean, if not even, like, I would I would not feel comfortable, and I would not take the risk of letting my kids go to a school just out of fear of school shootings. Oh, sure, they have the drills, they can learn about all of these like protective things that can happen, what you do if there is an active shooter. I really am happy that my 4-year-old and 5-year-old and my 7-year-old kid, that they don't know any of those drills, that they don't need to know those drills, because that is not something that happens here. Um, Again, I recognize that it can. I'm not saying that it would never happen here, but it's not something that happens here, or it's not as common as it is when it happens in the States. And so for that reason, I just would not feel comfortable to send my kids to school. Would you? Would you feel comfortable to send your kid to school knowing that they might need to take a bulletproof backpack with them, or that they might not be able to have those shoes with the twinkle lights? Those are discouraged at school, because if there is an active shooter and your kid is hiding and they had those twinkly shoes, that's something that can identify them to a shooter. I'm so glad that I don't have to think about this, and I can just buy my daughter her twinkly lights shoes because she loves them, and I don't need to worry about her getting killed at school because of her shoes. Something else that really bothers me is this extreme discrepancy between wealth and poverty in the States. Um, I lived in a pretty affluent neighborhood when I lived there, and when I was working for a Dutch company, we had our home office was in Los Angeles, very fancy place, with a golden staircase, like very fancy. All of this was very fancy, and we would end up flying to have meetings in Los Angeles, and we would go to all of these like very luxurious and fancy places. But right outside of those fancy places, you would see like hundreds of homeless people in front of neighborhoods, like multi-million-dollar homes, neighborhoods. You see homeless people driving up to my former boss's house, who lived in the Hollywood Hills, where all of these celebrities live and all of these fancy people live. The road, I'm not kidding you guys, it was pothole after pothole. Like, you were like this in the car, because the government doesn't have enough money to fix the public roads. Meanwhile, you have multimillionaires and billionaires living in these homes. It just doesn't make sense in my mind that there's something so wrong with having a society that lives like that, where at the expense of having all of these luxurious and expensive things, that somebody is paying the price for that. It just doesn't feel right. And I don't want to contribute to a system that encourages that, or that thrives on that. I don't want that. I'd much rather have my more modest salary, my more modest life, but know that those around me are also okay and in a home and not sleeping outside in the winter. Like, I don't know. Again, I'm not saying that there's no problems in the Netherlands, because there are, and there are certainly housing crisis. There is a huge cost of living. The cost of gas right now is, I mean, it's huge, and it's really, there are definitely difficult things about living in the Netherlands right now. But when it comes down to it, it's these basics of being human, and being human with each other, and saying, I don't need $1 million salary. I'm okay to have a lower salary. But then I know that my neighbors and my friends and people, even people I don't know, um, are going to be spending the winter like under a roof with access to heating. Like that, that's meaningful for me. That's significant. And that's something that I constantly think about. In the Netherlands, we're seeing news about all of these advancements that we're making. Now they're overhauling the system of childcare where they want to make it free or almost free for most people instead of having to pay for that. So we're making these advancements. And when I compare that to the United States, where I feel like it's going backwards, the Netherlands was the first country, I think, in the world to make working from home a legal right for most employees. Of course, not everyone can work from home all the time, but for most employees, they give you new rights, more rights for you as a person, for you as an employee, more protections for you, for your family. And the US is going the opposite way, in my opinion. Now, I know that the federal government is trying to do some things, but like the whole conversation about women's healthcare and abortions and access to this medically necessary and oftentimes life-saving treatment for a lot of women. And even if it's not, again, it's your choice what you want to do. But the fact that rights, instead of being added and the American society moving forward and making progress, I feel like it's going backwards. Like I can't believe that. That's not where I want to live. I don't want to live in a country that's like taking things away from people. I want to live in a country that's creating more opportunities for people to live a secure and stable life. I don't want my daughter or my son growing up in a country where they might not be able to get the health care that they need, or their partner might not be able to get the health care that they need because of somebody else's views, religious views that they may or may not have, they may or may not share. But it's just unbelievable to me that rights are being taken away from people at this day and age. And I want no part of it. No part of it. It blows my mind that there are ingredients in food that Americans are eating every single day, including some of my favorite foods. That, like, I definitely ate them. Kraft mac and cheese. So good. But you know what? There's ingredients in that food that is banned in the EU, like in the entire European Union. So why is that? There are so many more protections here for the common person. It is not about a company that has so much money that can lobby to governments to get their agenda passed at the cost of human lives or at the risk of harming people. In Europe, they're just like, no, sorry, your bottom line or your how much money you need to make or want to make, your shareholders, that is not more important than making sure that our society overall is healthy. So yeah, I I don't even trust the food that I would be eating in the States now. So how could I ever want to live there? So I guess at the end of the day, when I think about it, are there amazing opportunities in the US? Yes. Can you go there as an entrepreneur or something and become very wealthy? Yes. Can you take your job that you work in the US in the Netherlands and apply for the same position in the US and make a ton more money? Yes, you can. But the cost of that, what you will lose, the social safety net, the health, the access to healthcare, the clean water and food safety and food security, no guns. I mean, that's just not worth it to me personally. There is no amount of money that you could pay me that would convince me that it's worth giving up these basic rights and things that we have in Europe. There's no amount of money that to me is worth more than that. I hold this sacred and value it. And yeah, take all the money you want, but I'd rather have less and live a more safe and stable and secure full life. I'm curious to know, what do you think? Have you had conversations with Americans, maybe here in the Netherlands or something, and heard similar stories? Or is it absolutely crazy what I'm saying? Is this something that you expected or didn't expect? But do let me know what you think. And if you're an American, I would also be interested to hear from you, how you think about the things that I've mentioned and how you see these things. And are they important to you? Are they not important to you? Let me know. So that is today's video. Thank you so much for coming over and for spending some time with me. Thanks a lot for watching. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.